Smart fantasy football owners are always looking to get ahead of the game and pick up players before they become hot commodities. So, with the NFL trade deadline not far off, who are the guys that you should be looking at? Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, here to help you again with some early waiver wire pickups, guys that might help you beyond week 7, down the stretch, and who knows, maybe these guys could be league winners during the playoff stretch. Let's talk about some players that could be traded. Of course, we never really know what's going to happen. The NFL trade deadline isn't quite as exciting as the Major League Baseball one. You know, that's really a whole entity unto itself, stashing guys before the trade deadline, so many moves. But there might be some movement, and if there is a team going to make some moves, you know it is the LA Rams. And we have to start with a guy who's actually been dropped all over the place, Cam Akers. Of course, you know why. He's not playing in LA anymore, no matter what happens. Whether he gets traded or not, it's done. We don't know all the details behind it. It doesn't matter for our sake. So Cam Akers has been dropped by 70,000 Yahoo owners. He's now only 55% owned, which means there's a good chance he's floating out there. Somebody has already given up on him or is ready to. So why should you pick him up? He's not going to play for the Rams. We don't really know if he's going to play for anybody. Okay, so obviously you're taking a chance here. This is a guy who I know is only averaging 3 yards per carry. Does not look the same since that Achilles injury, understandably. And he's frustrated because he's not played over 50% of the snaps in any game. And obviously some sort of difference with McVay. You know, it's interesting. You think Sean McVay has kind of stood by his guy. You know, he'd support him maybe when he shouldn't have, but I guess Akers doesn't see it that way. So if he gets traded, is he somewhere where he can be kind of in a timeshare? Most likely, but he'll go somewhere where he will have a path to playing time. He is a guy who has been explosive at times. He has some potential for production. And so I don't think you can count him as a starting running back in fantasy. But of all the guys you see on the waiver wire for running back, there is nobody else who is as talented or is going to get a path to playing time better than his. You're looking at handcuffs, rookies who haven't touched the field yet, all of these guys. So, you know what, Akers, if you have the room and he's been dropped, it's not the worst thing to stash him for a guy, you know, instead of a rookie who hasn't sniffed the field like a Zamir White, who I was high on. Apparently he's not even going to play this year. You know, James Cook, it's maybe not happening for him. Take a chance on a guy who at least will play. Now, if Cam Akers is traded, that's going to pave the way for a potentially interesting rookie who also hasn't played, and that is Kyren Williams. All right, so Williams is somebody who might have made it a really even more confounding backfield if he didn't fracture his foot in the preseason. So here's the thing, full disclosure before I get into this, I'm not a Williams guy. I'm not really big on him, and I didn't like him in the pre-draft process. Not somebody I was interested in, and being part of a 3-man committee with Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers, meant I have zero Kyren Williams. But now things are different. Number one, not injured anymore. After the bye week, he is expected to come back. And of course, even if Akers doesn't get traded, he's not playing for them. So there's a good chance he does at least share time with Henderson. And what we've heard is, you know, McVay likes his guys. He really liked Williams, and he was set to maybe have a major role if he hadn't gotten injured. So the thing is with Williams, look, he was very productive in the last 2 years at college, went over 1,000 rushing yards, and a very prolific pass catcher, 35 and 42 receptions respectively each of the last 2 seasons. That means he maybe could be a 3-down back. Now, I don't know how exciting that is compared, you know, to past years with the Rams, because the Rams offense just looks terrible. But still, we're talking about a guy who could see a major role on what should be a good offense. You know what? He's not a burner. He only ran a 4.65 40, and that's why he fell all the way down to the 5th round this year. But obviously, when you get to the pros and you're on the field, that 40 time doesn't matter. He's been productive, and if McVay likes him, maybe we should like him too. And then let's keep going with one more Ram. So this is another return from injury. You remember Van Jefferson? He was a wide receiver 3 all last year. Hasn't played yet because he's been injured since the preseason. He is set to return after the bye, so we should see Jefferson in week 8, and he probably will resume his role. And so we know what he can do. Last year, 50 catches, 802 yards, and 6 touchdowns. You know, that'll play. He's not a guy who's ever going to be this, target hog. Obviously, they already got one there in Cooper Kupp. The number 2 and 3 receivers, even in LA, aren't looking too exciting these days. But maybe Jefferson at least has some rapport still with Stafford that Allen Robinson hasn't gotten. And look, no disrespect to Ben Skowronek, but he shouldn't be the number 2 receiver on this team, and he is, all right? Maybe Van Jefferson steps in, brings that vertical threat. He's at least a high ceiling play. He's a guy who can take those deep passes to the house, and so he can be flexed kind of at any time. So if you're looking for a receiver with some upside, Van Jefferson might be your guy. Another receiver with upside, but he might need a trade in order to reproduce what he did last year, is Kendrick Bourne. Now, you know, Bourne also, well, he actually put up very similar numbers to Jefferson last year. 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, kind of had a little breakout season that nobody saw coming. But he hasn't done it this year because he started out in the doghouse, and this came from training camp. Don't know why, but Bourne just rubbed Bill Belichick the wrong way, and if you do that, you're not going to see the field much. And he hasn't. Look, there's only been one game this season where he's had more than 2 catches, and he hasn't started any game other than that one game. There's a good chance he does get traded. You know, they might want to flip guys like Nelson Aguilar too, but Bourne is more likely to be traded, not just because of the doghouse situation, but because his contract is more friendly. So if Bourne does go to another team, well, at least he'll get on the field more. He has that big playability. I talked about that before. He doesn't need a ton of targets to be productive. And again, he won't be more than a flex play, but this is a high-end flex that you could put out there. So see what happens with him. You know, stash him for now. If he doesn't get traded, you just cut bait and move on. Let's go receiver one more time. This is a guy who maybe could have had some big playability, but we haven't seen it, and we really, literally have not seen him on the field this year. I'm talking about Denzel Mims of the Jets. I mean, look, you feel bad for Elijah Moore. You think that he's not getting enough opportunities. How about Mims, who has not touched the field? So they've got enough talent there, receiver. They don't need him. There's really no reason for them to keep him. And you remember from the preseason, he actually requested a trade, but they didn't do it. Well, now, I mean, there's no reason not to. There's probably a team out there who is willing to take a chance. Just look at like Jalen Reagor, got a chance in Minnesota. No, he hasn't done much, but look, Mims, maybe with the first start, maybe he lands on a team where he can actually have an impact. Some people talking about the Bears. Okay, that's not a good situation for fantasy, but it's better than what he's got going on now. Mims was a second-round pick. You know, he is, if you know Tyquan Thornton from the Patriots, look, this was him a couple years ago, second-round pick out of Baylor, speed guy. A lot of people thought he was going to be a stud. It hasn't happened. This would be for deeper leagues if you really have bench space or you're just looking for the ultimate flyer. But Mims is a guy who might be interesting if he lands in the right spot. And then my last pick for this week, let's kind of circle back here to D'Ernest Johnson. I mentioned him a few weeks ago. So also before the season, it was Kareem Hunt who wanted to trade and didn't get it. They're holding on to him even though he's in a contract year, might not keep him. They're obviously pretty good with Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt is kind of disappointed, but look, there's a good chance that his backup, which is D'Ernest Johnson, might get traded because he's not seeing the field almost at all either. This is somebody who just now touched the ball for the first time last week. I mean, he's not even getting on for, as a decoy, for blocking. I mean, they don't really need him, let's be honest. So why not get something back for him? So D'Ernest Johnson has been effective. Teams might be interested. This guy who averages 5.3 yards per carry for his career, and he filled in nicely on times where Chubb and or Hunt were hurt last year. So if the Browns are going to keep Chubb and Hunt at least through this season, they got rookie Jerome Ford who's on IR, but they kind of have him in the pocket there. So maybe Johnson goes to a team where he can at least have an opportunity to contribute. So desperate for RB, aren't we all? You got room to stash somebody. Try D'Ernest Johnson, see what happens. If he moves to another team, you might have a guy with some value. All right, those are my early waiver wire picks coming out of week 7. Don't forget, we have everything you need to help win this coming week. Start sit advice, trade advice, waiver wire right here. Check out our playlist and stay with us for our live shows every Saturday night to help you set those winning lineups.